On this episode of Business is Personal, I'm sitting down with Lucy Dabo. She is the CEO of Together Consultancy. We're going to be talking about people, purpose, and culture in organizations. We're going to talk about how it feels as an owner to exit your company. And we're going to talk about the kind of leadership that's necessary in order to get culture change happening. Also, if you haven't connected with me yet, connect with me on LinkedIn. Do you feel disconnected at work? Are you feeling exhausted? Almost like you hate your job and secretly maybe your boss too? This is Business is Personal, a blueprint to discovering and creating meaning at work in collaboration with Smashy TV, a live streaming service in the Middle East for the driven, the dreamers, and the doers. I'm so excited to have Lucy Dabo with me today. This is going to be such a good conversation. She's all about people and culture, which is exactly my field, which, that's why I love this. It's going to be great. She is the founder and CEO of Together. It's a consultancy based in Dubai, and I don't want to take too much away from your message. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Corrie. Hi, I'm Lucy, CEO of Together. And our purpose for our agency is to make great workplace culture the norm, not the exception. Corrie said it before, we work almost half our lives. We should be doing it with meaning and passion and engagement. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but at least make it purposeful. So we help organizations craft their culture, create it, co-create it, and then embed and activate it throughout the organization. And we think it's a superpower because when you have a great workplace culture, anything's possible.
I totally agree with you. Okay, remember, like every person that's participating in every organization is the product of a million years of successful evolution, right? 100%. The humans that didn't succeed, they're not here. So everybody that's in all of our organizations is the latest iteration in an improving design, and we're all capable of tremendous amount more than we give ourselves and each other credit for. Do you find the same when you're working in organizational culture?
100%. And intrinsically, humans want to contribute.
100%.
We are hardwired to want to contribute positively. Right. And yes, a few tiny number might be disruptive, but generally speaking, people come to work to do their best. And the purpose of having a great culture is that helping people to do it in the right way and channeling their energy in the same direction, as opposed to making it up as they go along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we tend to have a kind of, I don't want to say depressive or dystopian, but negative biased view about organizations and people and leaders and bosses. And I've found that there's very few evil people on the planet. And most people are really just generally good. And most people have this fear that they're in it alone, but the reality is that they're in it together. And if we help them to wake them up to that, and we get them to see the part that they play in whatever economic game that they're involved in, then it just adds so much more purpose and meaning to their lives.
100%. And let's not forget, COVID has just changed all of this.
Sure.
It has fast-tracked the priority of people having introspection.
Yeah.
Suddenly everyone was isolated at home, doing their job, not literally everybody, but the large majority of office workers. And that moment to pause and reflect and recognize what work means, how much time we spend at work.
Right.
And those who were really engaged and purposeful thrived.
Right.
And those that didn't floundered. And that's why we've got the Great Resignation. That's why everyone is looking for more, which is where purpose becomes paramount.
Yeah, your focus is purpose, people, and culture. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
All right. So tell me, when you're going into an organization looking for a purposeful people culture, what are you looking for? What are your benchmarks?
Well, we use a combination of different benchmarks, mainly measure. One thing that we know, certainly when it comes to culture, many organizations are using engagement as their measurement metric. And engagement is about I. Yeah. That's not culture.
Right.
We is culture. Right. It's the overall organization. So we use a model called PREP. Which is about purpose, reputation, engagement. These are really, 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 and performance, so key because, and that C-suite level, right? They're the ones that have that exposure over everything, and they're ultimately the decision makers of whether this work happens or it doesn't. It's not that they're at the core of it all, but we know that if we don't have the leadership team on board, committed and invested for the long run, it's ineffective.
I love that you said that because there's so many C-suiters out there that are convinced that this is something that needs to happen at the grassroots and, let's just give the people what they want kind of thing. But there is no such thing as a grassroots movement in a private organization. The research is very solid on that. If it doesn't come from the top, it will not permeate the bottom. And so we need the C-suiters on board. We need the CEOs and the CFOs to be like, full 100% buy-in.
Well, and in our experience, it has to be absolutely aligned with business strategy.
Yep.
So we know culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes, of course.
But now it's about business strategy and culture strategy being absolutely interconnected, because it's about, and that's why the C-suite is so important.
That's right.
Because without that clarity on direction and where the organization's moving towards, it's very difficult to build the right kind of culture that will support that and be the driving force behind it.
Well, I've been really lucky actually in my day job to have had the opportunity to transform a couple of major organizations that way, and starting with both strategy and culture. I've been a strategy professor for, I don't know, a decade now. And I've been doing business strategy for 25 years, and culture for just as long. But to be able to marry the two, this is what the business is doing, and these are the kinds of people that are doing it. I think to answer both those questions at the same time it's humbling, and it's a really fun privilege.
Well, I mean, for us, it's come from first-hand experience.
Right.
So I co-founded a business in 2004 and spent over a decade building it, and we were renowned for our culture.
Right.
We were a culture-first, culture-centric organization. We were rewarded for it.
Yeah.
We were in the Great Places to Work Index year on year. We were in the SME Top 100. We knew what it felt like to outperform on every business metric, because culture was at the core of the organization.
I never asked you how you exited from that.
It was an acquisition and merger, and that was really what fueled my fire to create this new consultancy together, because what I was able to witness firsthand was building a business with culture at the core, and then I was able to witness firsthand when it's not prioritized, what can happen to an organization, which ended in me exiting early in the end.
Sure. Look, I've exited my own companies as well. Did you mourn? I did.
Massively. I mean, it's
and
hard,
I don't
think you ever, I think like any grief, I don't think you ever fully get over it.
Well, it was a couple of years ago I sent my eldest son off to college. It was not dissimilar, right? My experience of that was like, I'm proud, but I'm also sad. So watching the organizations grow on without me has been hard as well, and watching my son develop without me has been, again, I'm proud, but sometimes I wish I could be more involved. Do you get those too?
Well, I think ours is quite a unique circumstance, because in the end, the acquisition merger didn't deliver for either organization in the end, for a range of different reasons. Actually, although it's gone on, their brand doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I had one of those too.
I know. Well, there you go.
I know. Like,
had the same.
One of my first organizations is now dissolved, because like I exited out and they took it over, and then they dissolved it into something else, and I was like, oh, my baby. You know
what? This is the reality of life. Life is a journey, and chapters, and this is another chapter in this beautiful story called life. And look, you can't regret. I don't believe in regret. I feel like we learn, and we take those learns and we use them as effectively as possible. 100%. And I think that is at the core of this new consultancy, that I've been absolutely driven to build a sustainable model that can live on beyond founders, beyond shareholders, that we can have something that isn't reliant on a growth strategy that links to exit or acquisition, that there's a way of building something that can continue on.
Well, I think for me, one of the most rewarding artifacts of having exited an organization before is that 20 years later, former employees are saying, hey, how's it going? How you doing? They're reaching out to me on LinkedIn, watching your content, just want to let you know that my experience with you was one of the most formative of my career. It led me to this and this and this. And that for me has been so rewarding. So even if the brand itself has dissolved, the influence that we've had in those people's lives has carried on and been part of their formation, and been part of the thread that's now led them into whatever career they're in now. Well,
it speaks volumes about workplace culture when your kind of previous employees become, your
heroes?
greatest and alumni. I mean, certainly the Dabo and Co alumni is incredibly powerful, and they are in business together now. They are, consultants that everyone works with. They support one another. Everyone still is incredibly connected, and that makes it all worthwhile, knowing that legacy lives on.
Of course.
And that culture still is there, just because the organization's changed.
What part of that culture do you try to replicate now in Together? Actually,
for me, culture is completely unique. No two organizations are the same, and the whole construct of Together is so different to 15, 20 years ago when we founded the first business. And now the whole way that businesses are structured, we have so many different opportunities, agile models, traditional models. So actually it's about finding the right environment and the right drivers for the specific business. So for us now, it's all about how can we be fluid, how can we adapt to what the market needs and wants when it comes to an employee point of view, because we know that hybrid working, flexibility, these are really, really, really important. And that really comes back to why culture is so high on the agenda now. People are asking for it, and you can't ignore the movement of employees that are just demanding it.
That's true. No, more and more, I think company owners and leaders are recognizing the importance of curating an employee experience and curating the employee journey, because there's beginning, middle, and end, right? And it follows the same as every product, every service. There's a curve.
Yeah.
And so I'm not under any delusion that anybody works with me is going to be working for me for the next 30 years. Okay, and especially the most talented people, what we know about talent is that the more talented you are, the less retainable you are.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to have really amazing onboarding and really amazing exiting. And as long as we keep that going, then we can maintain our culture. But if the turnover is too abrupt, or too quick, if the turnover is too fast, then it's very difficult to maintain culture.
No, and that is often a concern. How do you build it and how do you retain it?
Right.
And actually, because again with leadership, if the C-suite leave and they've invested all this time to build and craft this really effective culture, and then they all move, does it leave? And that's where how you embed it and activate it. So that's really where the work starts. For us, you define it, you co-create it, you launch it, but then the real time and investment comes in how you embed it and activate it consistently, because you talked earlier about that kind of curve with employees. Internal communications and engaging your community in the workplace is like a campaign. Apple don't launch a phone, put it out there and never mention it again. They are consistent, they are clear, they communicate. You have to keep being consistent, because otherwise, if you're not investing in it, it will die.
I love that, and I absolutely agree with that. Look, internal communication strategies inside your organization are what's going to keep your culture hot and fast and solid, 100%. That's what's going to make your culture outlast the employee lifespan of any of your single employees, including your C-suite, by the way.
And that's why we have those sort of three areas. You mentioned them earlier: people, purpose, and culture. Because without those three areas, a culture can never survive or be created. Your people are at the core of it. Whatever you do, leaders can often become a little bit insulated and say, in our line of work, it's not so important. It's universal. Humans are universal, and they exist everywhere. Purpose, why are we doing it? Why do I come to work every day? How aligned am I to what the organization is doing? And what we find over and over again is there is this enormous gap between the C-suite having absolute clarity. They know why they do it. They know what the business strategy is. They know what the values are. And then this enormous gap to the rest of the organization. And people need to know what they're contributing towards. It's incredibly important. And that's there where you can build your culture.
How far would you go on inviting the employees themselves to contribute to the definitions of purpose and values and
100% essential. We wouldn't do it without it. So although it starts at the top, it has to be across the organization. Which
it has to be an inclusive process.
If it's not, completely ineffective. Words on a wall, tokenistic, ineffective, and inauthentic. It has to feel like it's come from within the business. Otherwise, it will fail.
It's more challenging when you have like 10,000 employees to ask everybody's opinions and kind of get everything amalgamated. And then there's always the danger of not being able to steer what the majority want into something that's actually going to be feasible for the organization. But I definitely agree that there's got to be incredibly intelligent and intentional communication to make sure that whatever the vision, mission, values, and goals are for the organization is not just communicated to the employees, but the employees have a chance to buy in. Right? Because that's half of their lives too, right? Like if I'm putting half of my life into Apple, you used it as an example, I want to make sure that the half of my life that I'm putting into that project every day is a meaningful half. So I need to buy into the vision, because that's taking up half of my life and I'm never going to get that back.
Ever. I mean, we do use a lot of methods that can involve everybody.
Right.
There's different formats. Because if we don't measure the culture, we don't understand what's happening in an
Sure.
organization, it's very hard to shape it. So
Sure.
you need a baseline. And therefore we do use a variety of different tools where we can go out to 10,000, we can go out to 30,000. And there's a whole campaign to get 10,000 to actually engage and do it. But what that tells us is what's really happening. What is the current circumstance? Because again, generally speaking, CEO will say one thing, results will say something else. And you know the biggest challenge when it comes to culture? Fact, opinion.
100%.
And if we don't have fact,
100%.
and we don't have data, then I may as well give up and go file my nails because we get nowhere.
I've never had anybody on the show that I can ask this question. But I know you're going to understand this. Yeah, look. What are the leadership personas that you find most frustrating to work with while you're trying to improve the quality of life for their employees?
I mean,
I'm not asking for names,
no,
but leadership personas.
The reality is the leaders that talk to us aren't there. They are already willing and able. So actually, we don't have that challenge because people have this perception that you're in culture consultancy. Therefore, you must be rescuing every toxic sinking ship known to man. Honestly, that doesn't happen because the CEO of a sinking ship tends to not be very open-minded or progressive in their thinking. The people that pick up the phone and speak to us already know it's essential, it's the top of their agenda. A CEO in their top 5 priorities, workplace culture is rising. And so we tend to find genuinely, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, that they tend to be incredibly progressive and open because when we come in to work with them, they have got to open their cupboard and show us all the skeletons and be ready to hear the comfortable and the uncomfortable because our role is to challenge and support. And therefore they've got to be ready for that. And so happily, most of the time, and if they're not, honestly, we wouldn't do the work. Because our purpose, mission, vision, and values is all about impact and us being there for every man in the organization. C-suite is how we get in, but our work is about everyone in the organization.
I totally agree with you. I'm on the pure strategy side as well. So sometimes I'm called in just purely out of strategy and process and systems. And I will work very hard to influence direction in terms of culture from that platform. But it means that I have the unenviable privilege of dealing with some strongly willed, individualistic leaders.
So what's your worst one?
Oh, man. Without naming names, I think the omnipotent dictator is the most difficult persona that I have. The person that already thinks they know everything. They already think they have more knowledge about the industry and their company than anyone could possibly have in a lifetime. And therefore, their need for me is purely decorative. Do you know what I mean? And so I end up being a hood ornament for them, at least for the first little while until I've heard enough that I can maybe, on a few occasions, I've been able to break their hearts, which is great. And I've been able to crack through all of that, which ends up being a very high-level imposter syndrome. That persona tends to be hiding under a very high-level imposter syndrome. But once I can break their hearts and help them to see who they are in the process and all of the lives of the people that are around them contributing to what gives them meaning in their life, then I have a lot more leeway and movement in the organization.
Of course. No, and that's actually where the real hard work comes, is the implementation. And that's what we wanted to include as a really important factor, because in our experience, it gets to a point where then they go, great, I know what to do now, but who's going to do it? And how are we going to be accountable? And how do we stop real life coming back in and everyone going, brilliant, we've got these shiny new culture manifesto, we've got our values playbook, we're all set to go. And then they get back to their office and go, the phone's ringing, the emails download, and suddenly it drops off the radar again. So building that kind of program of accountability and momentum, because you touched on it earlier, it's a movement. It's not a mandate. It's got to be a movement, and that requires
100%.
Consistency and input from everyone.
I found one of my best practices over the last, I think probably 6 years, I've developed a lot, is working with internal teams. And so I used to have my own consultancy before I exited out a number of years ago. And in that consultancy, I had my team and I would bring them in with me. We would do strategy and restructuring. And then we would exit and we would take all of the expertise with us. And I always thought there's probably a better way to do that. And so now, whether I'm on the strategy side or the organizational behavior side, I try to work as much as possible with internal teams. Yeah. So I'll actually choose, a soft committee of people, say, and then I'll train them. This is how we do transformation. This is how you do iterative design. These are the kinds of things we're going to try, and these are the kinds of mistakes we're expecting to make along the way. We're going to move fast, and these are the things I'm thinking are going to break, you know? So that kind of thing. But then when I leave the organization, it's being wanted but unnecessary because the expertise is still there. And I find that organizational renewal, restructuring, iterative design for the organization itself needs to be an ongoing cultural process now, rather than a project. And so leaving those expertise in the organization so they can continue that without external dependencies. Of course, it's not as good for my pocketbook because then they don't need me anymore. But I've found that the ones that I've had the most impact on tend to make up excuses to get me back.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, which
is recurring revenue.
Yes, it's recurring revenue from a consulting, and it's also, it's flattering and humbling at the same time as well. But yeah, I found working with internal teams to make sure that the expertise remain in the organization has been an amazing best practice.
We have added a layer of sort of capability building too, because if you've got a team of people that just don't have the skill set, which is very common in today, where the business is changing or transforming, or the line of work, the lines of business are changing, but people don't have the skills that they need today. And they were never taught them 5 years ago. So how do we build in those capabilities that align with the values and culture that the business is trying to groom, and give them the tools so they can self-sustain themselves?
Well, look, we've known for a long time, leadership, management is a set of skills, coaching is a set of skills, curating culture is also a set of skills. You can learn this.
And it's actually, our dream, Chief Culture Officer at
so
board
good.
level has to be.
I like that.
If it's not on the agenda, which it is now at board level, but it's probably not getting the attention it needs just yet. But ultimately, in 5 years, why not? It seems to be, as long as we can keep consistently sharing the stories and examples of where those performance metrics are being met and reached and exceeded, then there's nothing to stop us.
That's amazing. Listen, let me ask you a personal question, because business is personal, etc. What gives you the most meaning in the work that you do?
100% the people. Consulting is a people business. We don't have products. We don't have anything else. All we're doing is human to human. And after years in a leadership role, watching, developing, working with, collaborating with great talent just gives me the most enormous satisfaction and drives me, gives me energy, inspires me, helps me want to drive forward. So if we can give more people platforms and opportunities to thrive, grow, and inspire, then I'm going to die a happy woman.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, Lucy. It's so good to see you again.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope we get to hang out again soon.
Definitely.
All right.
Thank you.
Do you feel disconnected at work? Are you feeling exhausted? Almost like you hate your job, and secretly, maybe your boss too? This is Business is Personal, a blueprint to discovering and creating meaning at work in collaboration with Smashy TV, a live streaming service in the Middle East for the driven, the dreamers, and the doers.